Hi and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership Lab. Today I'm joined by Simon Cayley, CEO of the Bishop's Action Foundation. So let's start there, Simon, because the Bishop's Action Foundation, I'm sure there'll be a number of people watching who don't actually know what BAF and Bishop's Action Foundation do, so please share.
So we've been in the region since 2005. We started back in 2003 as a concept when the Anglican Bishop Philip Richardson was working with Stuart Trundle, then CEO of Venture Taranaki Trust, and they were looking at, here's an established organisation, the Anglican Church, how can it make more of a difference for community in our region? 2 years from that idea and a whole lot of research, the concept of the Bishop's Action Foundation was born. What we do is we contribute to knowledge. If we don't think we know enough, let's find out. We look to create solutions to issues in our region that are going to outlast us. We don't want to be leading this forever and a day, so we create collaborations and hope that they can flourish. And we run services where we need to run a service to respond to those issues over time, and that's us in a nutshell, Adam.
So do you want to give us an idea of some of the services that you do?
Sure. So one of our flagship programs is the Wheelhouse. I think many people would have come across the Wheelhouse, and that's a collaboration. There are 8 organisations in there, been strongly backed by Toy Foundation over its life, and that's providing everything that not-for-profits need in terms of capacity, capability, training, funding advice. We run a number of social isolation prevention services, so we're working in partnership with the Selvin Foundation and the Tainui Rest Home here, and we run day centres for older people. And what it's about is if you're by yourself and isolated in community as an old person, this is a point of connection for you, and that's something that we've run now for about 8 years. We also run the Seasons for Growth program, so children going through grief or loss, they have a program of 10 weeks and it provides coping strategies for them. But we also have quite a lot of innovation, so over our life you'll have seen programs come and go.
Okay.
And we're trying to always release them. Great example is New Horizons, Aotearoa. So we incubated that with Kedi Al, its founder, for about 5 years. Provides mentoring for vulnerable rangatahi through intermediate schools. They're now under their own trust and flourishing out in community by themselves. So that's the kind of nature of the work.
So it's a really interesting concept in the fact that you're creating an environment where you're incubating these projects that then allow them to release, whereas a lot of organisations will look to hold them onto them, but actually you consciously want to let them go and flourish on their own.
From our very beginning, the Bishop's Action Foundation hasn't been about us.
Right.
It's been about what we can enable and support others to do. So we define ourselves as a catalyst for change. And if you imagine like yeast in bread, right? You put all those ingredients in, without the yeast, nothing comes together and rises, creates a life. That's our role. And so we are in for a period and then we're out. But what we don't want to do is set things up that fail. So it's about bringing together the right parties and the players that can create something that will flourish well past our involvement. I mean, a long way back, this is a good example, Stratford's Community House. Been around for 15 years now or so. So we pulled together the partnership of the church, the council, the funders, and led the program with that community to create and build the community house. We then supported the transition to a community trust and got out the way. And that's been flourishing ever since. So that's the kind of role that we're playing.
Which project are you most proud of?
I think in many ways, the program that I'm most proud of probably would be something like New Horizons. And there's a number of reasons for that.
Yeah.
Kedi is someone that came in with a really amazing idea, needed someone to come in and back him and provide support. And we had quite a tumultuous journey, you know, as you would with one of those things. We both made some mistakes along the way, but we kept going and we took an idea from its very concept to something that's now flourishing and benefiting rangatahi across 5-6 different schools, and still got the potential to keep growing. But more than anything else, it was always about Kedi and his idea. It was never about the Bishop's Action Foundation taking that idea and making it ours or changing it, and we've enabled that program to flourish through there.
So what does BAF do as an organisation that might be different from kind of Toy Foundation or any of the other kind of support networks that allows you to offer that different perspective and kind of create that nurturing incubation space?
I think one of the main things that we don't do is we're not a funder. So we're not coming into this relationship with the money as ours. And I think that gives us a slight independence in a way, because we're not actually needing someone to be accountable to us in terms of a dollar. Now, we might help them raise funds, but actually that's not why we're in the game. I think, as the name suggests, we're also a faith-based organisation. So we come into it with a really justice focus in terms of what we're doing. So for us, the passion, the enthusiasm is about achieving those outcomes through that change maker, that person that we're working behind. And for us to see them flourish is the outcome that we want. It's not actually about us building up a suite of anything that we need to retain. And there's a kind of liberation in that, in a way, because we're constantly looking to let these things go and not make them ours. And that's our outcome. And I think that is a point of difference.
What's the one project that you've not quite done yet that you feel for the region needs to be done?
It's really interesting, actually. We're almost there in one level, but we spent about a decade looking at the future of our rural townships. When you look across provincial New Zealand, you have 2 million people in Auckland and some big cities, but there's a lot of New Zealand that's rural and provincial, and yet there are townships that are kind of spiralling downwards all over the place. What can we do to actually sustain those townships? Because that's part of New Zealand Aotearoa as a country, right? So we spent a long time looking at sustainability for rural townships, and we've got a program that we're running now in Hawera with the District Council and Bisling, looking at bringing an enterprise hub to fruition down there. And the reason we're doing it is, what that's about is bringing entrepreneurs into those communities, or unlocking the entrepreneurs in those communities and allowing their enthusiasm and their ability to bring new ideas to bring socio-economic change to those communities. So that's something that we're really passionate about, but that's only the beginning of the journey. But we've put a lot of time and energy into how you sustain rural life and townships, because it's an important part of who we've been and who we need to be.
So I hear you talk, and it's very clear that you're really passionate about this. Where's the passion come from?
It comes from my history, my background. So when I was in England, I came out here in 2002. I worked in urban regeneration for local authorities. So I was representing community input into the redevelopment of large housing estates. And you realise that bureaucratic environment often forgot that those people lived in those homes. And even transitioning over here, I started working in local authorities, and they're quite regulated environments, policy environments. And so for me, stepping out to start the Bishop's Action Foundation was a really liberating experience, using that word again. And that's driven the passion for me, because I've seen the potential of being agile, being free, being fluid, being able to respond. And I've been in my role, sounds crazy, 17 years now, but it's constantly evolved. We've constantly reshaped, because we haven't tried to create the box necessarily always being the same and stick with it. We've had that freedom to go where people need us to go, and that keeps driving my energy.
So you've been in the role 17 years. What's stayed the same, and what's different now to what was 17 years ago?
I think what stayed the same is that core that I described of the Bishop's Action Foundation, not wanting it to be about us. All right, there is a humility within the Bishop's Action Foundation that I really relate to. I think that's definitely stayed the same. Our real focus on achieving outcomes and justice and working with others to do that has stayed the same, but the nature of the work that we've been involved in has evolved and transitioned over time. I mean, for a season we were heavily involved in the redevelopment process in Marfell, around the housing. We were modelling what could be built in that community, working with that community, looking at the road, and then it got sucked into Kiwi Build, so it's nothing to do with us anymore. And I could point to many stories. So the work itself has constantly evolved.
I'm here with Simon Cayley, Chief Exec of the Bishop's Action Foundation. Simon, what's a typical day for you?
It's busy. We're a really small, lean team. So although the Bishop's Action Foundation has quite a wide footprint, we do it with that lean team. So I've always got to juggle that. I'm the CEO for whatever that means, but that means I've got responsibilities for running the organisation, and that takes up time. But because we're small, I'm also running projects. So here's an example, long answer to your question. I'm working with Zeal at the moment and a lot of supporters, and we're running a social enterprise program. We've supported a cohort of those young people to develop a social enterprise called Kaitiaki Composting. It was pushed out through Chambers member to member last week, and it's about taking food waste and composting it and getting it out the system. But actually it's about giving them the experience of running a small enterprise. So I'm leading that. So that's a kind of hands-on, right in there, project commitment once a week. So it's a mix. Every day for me is a mix of what the CEO has to do, HR things, funding things, and real hands-on project stuff and innovation conversations. And I think that's one of the great bonuses of the role. It hasn't become static or stayed or locked away in bureaucracy. It's still really dynamic.
What do you have to do on a day-to-day or week-by-week basis which you're like, oh, this doesn't work for me?
At this point in the year, it's a really great question because it's we have an end of December financial year, so I'm right at the pointy end of the end of year audit process, and that's one of those, I've got to get on with it because I can't put it off any longer conversations, and I know it's important, but it doesn't feel fulfilling at one because it's such process work, and you're going back to look at stuff that's already been and happened all the time, and actually most of our energy and our work is about, well, what's the future, what's the stuff that we could do, what can we do, and that's where I think we get our energy from.
So you mentioned earlier that you used to work in local authority and then you took this role 17 years ago. How did that process come about? Did you respond to an advert, or you tapped on the shoulder?
So I was working in the community development team at New Plymouth District Council, and I was part of a small working group who were asked to come together and work with Stuart Trundle and Bishop Phillip to help sort of critique the model that they were building that was ultimately going to become the Bishop's Action Foundation. And there were other people, Mark Popwell, Louise Tester, part of that process. And as I moved through that process, I got more and more excited about what this thing, the Bishop's Action Foundation, might be. And I remember really clearly getting to a point I had two pathways on the table. There was clearly the potential of becoming the manager of community development at the council at the time, or there was this crazy idea of leaping out and starting something from the very beginning. And at that point, I think the Bishop's Action Foundation had an underwrite up to $100,000. That was it. There was nothing else. There was a nice one-page vision, mission, objective statement. And I talked with Teresa, my wife, about this for quite a while. And when am I ever going to have the chance to start something from scratch again? What a great opportunity. So I took that leap, and that's how it came about.
Your faith. So obviously with it being Bishop's Action Foundation, how important is your faith to you in how you operate daily, but also from a business perspective?
And it's a really interesting question because that's something that's grown with me in the role. So go back a bit, I come from a family with no religious sort of background connection at all. Both kids, Oliver and Amber, have been through the Catholic school system. Teresa, who I'm married to, is Catholic, and then I've ended up working for the Anglican Church. And so I've been exposed to and grown on a really interesting faith journey, and so for me it's become more and more important, and actually exploring and getting to know, who Jesus was, or the person was, getting into that space has become a really exciting and interesting part of my journey in the role. And I can see the benefits for an organisation like the Bishop's Action Foundation because it keeps us really true in terms of that justice focus and why we're doing it, and that's a value base that we have, that's another part of our unique niche.
So that value set, when you are speaking to businesses or within the community, what can people learn from that link between faith and values?
I think when you think about what faith is, it's not a passive thing, or it shouldn't be a passive thing, that actually I believe that's the end. It's an active thing. It's, I believe, so I will do this. And I think that's something that we've grown to understand as an organisation, is that faith core really inspires us and requires us to get out and be active and look for social change. And so that's part of what we're bringing into the conversation. Now, there's a step beyond that, which is the evangelical point, which is now I want to try and bring everyone else into there. And the Bishop's Action Foundation hasn't gone there. That's not our primary reason for being. It's the driver that sits within the organisation as something unique to keep us focused on that justice perspective.
So let's talk about you as a leader. At what point did you realise that you were a leader?
Good question, Adam. And I think if you're honest as a leader, you're always growing, and you need to always be open to other leaders helping you grow better at being a leader. But I think the main thing I've picked up, and I think taking on that role with that title, CEO, for whatever it means, you can call yourself anything, that for me was a real point in time when I'm now responsible. I am a point where I don't have to do everything, but I have to own the decisions here. And it can't be me trying to put other people into that space. That's mine to own. I am responsible. And as a leader, I need to back my team and I need to be prepared to own that responsibility. And I think the period we've been through with COVID and adjusting has been a really testing in a good way period for leadership. Because one of the things I found is the biggest thing a leader needs to do in that kind of environment is maintain objectivity. There is so much emotion and so much potential to get sucked into emotion, but actually you need to take the time to sit back, look at the whole picture and bring an objective process to your decision making, and that can be hard. But,
And what's your biggest learning point for you from the COVID situation?
that we always need to be prepared for change, actually, because you never know when it's going to be coming. If you are running an organisation that is so rigid that you can never shift it, or actually it's going to take you a massive effort to shift it, you're vulnerable, because in our society things are changing all the time, and it seems more and more rapidly now. No one saw that a pandemic was going to come, but actually it did show us that all of us, whatever business we run, have to have some ability to be agile.
And that agility and adaptability is absolutely key when you're looking at any organisation. When you think about the stakeholders that are associated with BAF, I'd love for you to just share who they are and where they get involved.
So stakeholders, right, the most important stakeholders are the change makers, who we're wrapping our support around, because it's their journey that will deliver the outcomes. But the Bishop's Action Foundation has never tried to do anything just by us. We're always reliant on collaborative partners, and some of those are funders, and we're really privileged in this region. There's some, Toy Foundation, others great funders that come in and get behind you and want to know what you're doing. But we've also got partners who bring other expertise. So you take that Stratford Community House example I used earlier. The District Council was so open to being a partner and playing in that. The Department of Internal Affairs was really interested in being a partner to that. The church was a partner, it was going to gift in its land. So we have such a wide range of stakeholders, and they are government departments, local authorities, they're funders, but they're community people and community organisations. And they're really important for us to always understand what each of those players around the table need, what's important to them, but also who's not around the table, perhaps should be.
So Simon, let's talk about you as a leader a little bit more. Who is the one or two people that have influenced you through your journey over the years?
I've been privileged actually to be exposed to some really great leaders at a very deep level. Philip, as the sort of founder and chair, our Anglican bishop, is a huge influence on me because of the way he approaches his work and his constant focus on putting the other first. But along the way, John Young, who sadly passed away quite some time ago now, was one of our founding trustees. John was a really powerful influence for me because he brought such wisdom. He was really able to support me at quite an early part of my leadership journey when I was running the foundation, and was a real support to me in that. Two other people that I was really influenced by though, one was our patron, and that was Sir Paul Reeves. Real privilege to have someone like Sir Paul so close and accessible. And the other was Tiki Tuturangi Romati, who passed away a few years back, but as co-martyr of the cathedral and also the Bishop's Action Foundation, and who our buildings are named after. Such a powerful perspective on the future of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the future of that integration, that coming together of Māori and Pākehā. And so that was really powerful for me, and it's still something that influences the way I try and approach work.
Was there anything specific that you got from them individually or collectively?
I remember one of the things I got from Tiki was the way he articulated the story of Ngā Purapura. He talks about that you had the English potato and the Māori potato, and then they cross-pollinated and you had the speckled potato, which became Ngā Purapura. And that was for him the future of land, our nation, as we became coming together, but without neither one losing where they came from, but as we came together. And such a powerful story for me in terms of how we approach, as an organisation, a commitment to te tiriti or waitangi. What does that really mean, and how do you approach that? So yeah, that was really powerful.
So you mentioned earlier about this aspect of you're always growing. How do you consciously and subconsciously look at your growth books, talks, speakers. Just interested to know how and what you do from a growth perspective.
That's me as a leader myself. Yeah. I'm always looking for opportunities to carve out some time to learn something new. Years ago, I went through a fantastic piece of training. It was all workflow training, but one of the pieces of advice I got right at the end was, every month you should be having lunch or coffee with someone you don't know. And the reason for that is it's about unlocking new opportunities that you might not have found. And I take that forward. I try and really be active in that and not be too busy to do that sort of work. But I'm also looking for snippets of listening to other people who could influence me because of the way they've approached their way of being a leader.
Can you give an example of how that's recently happened?
I do consciously go out, as I say, and have those lunches with people and lock those. And I caught up the other day with Ben Norton, who I worked with when he was at Ministry of Education, and I've lost touch, and he's now back up at WIT at the Polytechnic. And we had an hour and a half together, and there were 3 or 4 different new ideas that came out from that we're now pursuing around Bishop's Action Foundation working again with WIT. So just a great example there of just taking that time out to reconnect with someone.
Is there a particular book or TED Talk or anything like that where it's really kind of stuck, like some guiding principles?
Nick Francis wrote a book around Beyond Charity. And for me, running a charity, that's been one of the most influential books in terms of my approach to leadership, because it's all about not getting lost in a charity mindset that means you're always waiting for people to give to you, but remaining in control of your destiny, and not getting lost in trying to throw a solution at a problem before you really understand it. And he uses a great example in the book of, in England, there was a large city with a big homeless problem, yet the local authorities who ran all the council housing knew they had loads of houses that just weren't being occupied. So this great idea, put the two together, took homeless people off the street and put them in a house. Utter disaster, 80% failure rate, because they hadn't thought through that for the person they've taken off the street, they've now got responsibility. They've got a power bill, they've got to fill the fridge with food, they've got to tidy, clean, and they had no supports around those people. So just being really careful to make sure you've really thought through all of the consequences and that you're not just locked in one mindset.
I know a number of your team, but if I was to ask them, just tell me 2 or 3 words to describe Simon as a leader, what do you think they'd say?
I would hope they'd say he believes in us and he trusts us to do the job. But we know that when push comes to shove, he's got our back and we can go to him and he will make a decision on own it.
Okay, so trust. Earned or given.
Taken as on the table from day one. So not needing to be earned, it's right there. You might lose it potentially, but I'm trusting from the beginning.
And how does somebody lose your trust?
I'm a real sense, I don't know if it's a bit old school, I really believe in loyalty, actually. If you've got a problem, I don't mind talking about it, but it should be upfront and transparent. I don't do well if I find out that's not happened and something's gone on in the background and been really undermining. I believe we're part of a team, and that's a collective responsibility, and we're loyal to each other. Not to the point that we're going to put up with things that are not right, but there's a process how you talk about those and you don't undermine people.
Simon, just talk to us about the region. You've been here 17 years, maybe a little bit longer. Why is this place home for you?
It's always been home. When Teresa and I came out from England, we came straight to New Plymouth. I remember people from New Zealand and London saying at that time, why are you going there? But actually what we found is it's been an incredibly lucky place for us, a really welcoming place for us. And it's one of those great places that's small enough to be connected, but big enough that you don't feel like you're isolated in the middle of nowhere. I'm a real fan of the bush, and so for me, Maunga Taranaki and the park, that's my space. But I know my family love the beach, and so that's all there. So lifestyle, opportunities, it's all here. And I just find the community really engaging, and you can get to know people and you can really start to achieve things. One of the things I've noticed being a leader in the same place for 17 years, how important relationships are. And when people come and go and move all the time, how destabilizing that can actually be, because you find that when people have been around for a long time or stay and are stable, you can get to know and understand each other and really make things work. Whereas if leadership's too fluid, it really starts to undermine that potential.
So you've been in the role 17 years. At what point does that get stale?
That's a good question, and it's one any leader needs to be asking of themselves, am I the right person in this? Have I become stale, or is the organisation not achieving its potential because I've been here too long? For me at the moment, the way the foundation's evolved and the new things we've created and the new opportunities have responded to both. So a few years ago, we became trustees of the Bashford Nichols Trusts, which have their own story. And so I lead into that space. We're just working with the Wilberforce Foundation. Now, they're a national organisation. They've got 100 organisations they support. I'm actually working for them, delivering a project for a piece, and that's a national role. So I think for me, the role constantly renews itself, and I think I renew myself into that space. And so I can retain the energy. I think if I get to a point where I'm wondering what's next or struggling to know why I'm coming in, there's some triggers in there that need to change. But for the moment, I love it. And I just think, where else would I go? And I think I'm still doing the job well.
Last question. What's the legacy that you want to leave behind?
I'd actually like to leave a legacy where we can point to some things that we dealt with, that we responded to, that have constantly flourished to the point that no one needs to worry about them anymore. That would be a really great legacy. I'm not sure how realistic a legacy it is, but that's a legacy I'd like to leave. I'd also like to leave the organisation where people will come into it and look back and go, that organisation did some good stuff, and then I can move on.
Simon, thank you ever so much for your honesty, and sharing your story and a bit more about you as well as the organisation. This is a series called the Leadership Lab. Till next time, see you soon.